Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 2 of Stories with Scarlett. How has everyone's week been going? I know the holiday seasons can really bring out, I think, the best in people and sometimes the worst of people. I will say that if you are going out in public and maybe dealing with, service workers or going to a restaurant or, a retail establishment, please be just a little bit more mindful that everyone is trying their best. And let's just have a little bit more grace and kindness with each other, shall we? I think that that would really be helpful to get us through the season because I know that not everyone, this is not an easy time for everyone. So let's just give each other a little bit more grace and have a little bit more empathy this time of year. But aside from that, I'm really excited to continue on with scary stories to tell in the dark. Um, Little Ghosty here, sweet Ghosty, just ate his lunch, so he is just the best boy. And I'm still trying to figure out what to get him this holiday season. Do you have any ideas? And if so, drop those in the comments below for me. But aside from that, we are in the holiday season. So does anybody have any sort of just holiday traditions that they follow? And if so, I would love to hear about those. So feel free to drop those in the comments below as well. All right. With that, let's get right on to it and let's continue on with our book. You know what time it is. All right. This story is called The Guess. A young man and his wife were on a trip to visit his mother. Usually they arrived in time for supper, but they had gotten a late start and now it was getting dark. So they decided to look for a place to stay overnight and go on in the morning. Just off the road, they saw a small house in the woods. Maybe they rent rooms, the wife said. So they stopped to ask. An elderly man and woman came to the door. They didn't rent rooms, they said, but they would be glad to have them stay overnight as their guests. They had plenty of room and they would enjoy the company. The old woman made coffee and brought out some cake, and the four of them talked for a while. Then the young couple were taken to the room. They again explained that they wanted to pay for this, but the old man said he would not accept any money. The young couple got up early the next morning before their hosts had awakened. On a table near the front door, they left an envelope with some money in it for the room. Then they went on to the next town. They stopped at a restaurant and had breakfast. When they told the owner where they had stayed, he was shocked. "That can't be," he said. "The house burned to the ground and the man and woman who lived there died in the fire." The young couple could not believe it. So they went back to the house, only now there was no house. All they found was a burned out shell. They stood staring at the ruins, trying to understand what had happened. Then the woman screamed. In the rubble was a badly burned table, like the one they had seen by the front door. On the table was the envelope they had left that morning. Spooky. A couple of these pages are songs. Maybe one day I'll sing to you, but not today. The next story that we're going to move on to is called The Girl Who Stood on a Grave. Some boys and girls were at a party one night. There was a graveyard down the street, and they were talking about how scary it was. "Don't ever stand on a grave after dark," one of the boys said. "The person inside will grab you. He'll pull you under." "That's not true," one of the girls said. "It's just a superstition." "I'll give you $1 if you stand on a grave," said the boy. "A grave doesn't scare me," said the girl. "I'll do it right now." The boy handed her his knife. "Stick this knife in one of the graves," he said. "Then we'll know you were there." The graveyard was filled with shadows and was quiet as death. There is nothing to be scared of, the girl told herself, but she was scared anyway. She picked out a grave and stood on it. Then quickly, she bent over and plunged the knife into the soil, and she started to leave. But she couldn't get away. Something was holding her back. She tried a second time to leave, but she couldn't move. She was filled with terror. "Something's got me," she screamed, and she fell to the ground. When she didn't come back, the others went to look for her. They found her body sprawled across the grave. Without realizing it, she had plunged the knife through her skirt and had pinned it to the ground. It was only the knife that held her. She had died of fright. That's rough. Dang. All right, on to the next story, shall we? This next one's called A New Horse. Two farmhands shared a room. One slept at the back of the room. The other slept near the door. After a while, the one who slept near the door began to feel very tired early in the day. His friend asked what was wrong. "An awful thing happens every night," he said. "A witch turns me into a horse and rides me all over the countryside." "I'll sleep in your bed tonight," his friend said. "We'll see what happens to me." About midnight, an old woman who lived nearby entered the room. She mumbled some strange words over the farmhand, and he found he couldn't move. Then she slipped a bridle on him and turned him into a horse. The next thing he knew, she was riding him across the fields at breakneck speed, beating him to make him go even faster. Soon they came to the house where a party was going on. There was a lot of music and dancing. They were having a big time inside. She hitched him to a fence and went on in. While she was gone, the farmhand rubbed against the fence until the bridle came off, and he turned back into a human being. Then he went into the house and found the witch. He spoke those strange words over her, and with the bridle, he turned her into a horse. Then he rode her to a blacksmith and had her fitted with horseshoes. After that, he rode her to the farm where she lived. "I have a pretty good filly here," he told her husband. "But I need a stronger horse. Would you like to trade?" The old man looked her over, and he said he would do it. So they picked out another horse, and the farmhand rode away. Her husband led his new horse to the barn. He took off the bridle and went to hang it up. But when he came back, the new horse was gone. Instead, there stood his wife with horseshoes nailed to her hands and feet. Wow. All right. And for this next one, it's called Alligators. A young woman in town married a man from another part of the country. He was a nice fellow, and they got along pretty well together. There was only one problem. Every night, he'd go swimming in the river. Sometimes he would be gone all night, and she would complain about how lonely she was. The couple had 2 sons, and as soon as the boys could walk, their father began to teach them how to swim. And then when they got to be old enough, he took them swimming in the river at night. Often, they would stay there all night long, and the young woman would stay home all by herself. After a while, she began to act in a strange way. At least, that was what the neighbor said. She told them that her husband was turning into an alligator, and that he was trying to turn the boys into alligators. Everybody told her there was nothing wrong with a man taking his son swimming. That was a natural thing to do, and when it came to alligators, there just weren't any nearby. Everybody knew that. Early one morning, the young woman came running into town from the direction of the river. She was soaking wet. She said a big alligator and 2 little alligators had pulled her in and had tried to get her to eat a raw fish. They were her husband and her son, she said, and they wanted her to live with them. But she had gotten away. Her doctor decided she had lost her mind, and he had her put in the hospital for a while. After that, nobody saw her husband and boys again. They just disappeared, but now and then, a fisherman would tell about seeing alligators in the river at night. Usually, it was 1 big alligator and 2 small ones, but people said they were just making it up. Everybody knows there aren't any alligators around here. All right, well, for this last story that I'm going to read you all from the book, this one's called Room for One More. A man named Joseph Blackwell came to Philadelphia on a business trip. He stayed with friends in the big house they owned outside the city. That night, they had a good time visiting, but when Blackwell went to bed, he tossed and turned and couldn't sleep. Sometimes during the night, he heard a car turn into the driveway. He went to the window to see who was arriving at such a late hour. In the moonlight, he saw a long black hearse filled with people. The driver of the hearse looked up at him. When Blackwell saw his queer, hideous face, he shuddered. The driver called to him, "There is room for one more." Then he waited for a minute or two, and he drove off. In the morning, Blackwell told his friends what had happened. "You were dreaming," they said. "I must have been," he said, "but it didn't seem like a dream." After breakfast, he went into Philadelphia. He spent the day high above the city in one of the new office buildings there. Late in the afternoon, he was waiting for an elevator to take him back down to the street. But when it arrived, it was very crowded. One of the passengers looked out and called to him. "There is room for one more," he said. It was the driver of the hearse. "No thanks," said Blackwell. "I'll get the next one." The doors closed, and the elevator started down. There was shrieking and screaming, then the sound of a crash. The elevator had fallen to the bottom of the shaft. Everyone aboard was killed. Wow. Just part 2 of some more good stories for you all. I hope you enjoyed all those stories. And I also hope that regardless of how you're spending your holiday season, that you find some peace and you're around people that you care about or even familiars that you care about. All right. Well, that's all for episode 2. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here with me today. And I can't wait to keep reading to you all and just being able to spend some time with you. Remember, just stay kind to those around you, and I'll see you next time. Bye, everyone.